All right, guys, this is episode 50 of Stone and Clay. I'm your host, Taylor Church. I got new mics. I got a new podcast desk. I got a candle. Reminds me of the last person I dated because I always lit the candle because it's so romantic. So yeah, my candle makes me sad, if that's what you're wondering. And my last episode was about the breakup. So we're still broken up. Still a little bit sad. But yeah, we're moving forward and been on some dates. Went on a date tonight, for goodness sake. And I'll tell you what, I'm gonna be honest. If you listen to the last episode, it was really tough, and I was really struggling for a little bit, and I have found a lot of strength and a lot of peace in prayer and in seeking my higher power. But I mean aggressively seeking. I don't mean just praying and believing in God and being faithful and whatever. I mean aggressively seeking my higher power. Whatever that means, that's what I've done. And what I've learned in this crucible, this emotional crucible, is that God doesn't necessarily take away your pain, but He helps you bear it, and He mitigates it, and He gives you peace when you can't find it. And I'm grateful for that. Today's episode is going to be about my trip to India that I got back from a couple weeks ago. I've been meaning to do the pod earlier, but listen, I was upgrading. I was getting some good new mics, and I'm excited. But I have to say, just because this is so just weighing on my heart, something pretty crazy happened this week, and a friend of mine tried to take his life, and he's okay now. But I happened to be there at the time, and it was a harrowing experience, and it was really, more than anything, sure, you could say it was traumatizing. It was heavy, it was sad, it was a lot of adjectives, but more than anything, it was heartbreaking. And it was a reminder that a lot of people out there are experiencing a tremendous amount of unfathomable pain that's really hard to understand or relate to. And he said some things in those dark hours that I've never heard a person say. In that moment of desperation, that moment of fear and vulnerability. And, it's opened my eyes to a lot of things. And, I don't want to go into too many details because I know it's a private matter between him and his close friends and family. But I'm just so grateful that I was there and was able to get him out of that darkness and into safer hands. And yeah, I'm going to move on to lighter topics, but it's just a reminder that not everyone you know is doing well. And a lot of people don't know where to put their pain and what to do with it. And I'm not saying that, you can save a life or you can do something drastic to change someone's state, but if nothing else, you can have a little more compassion, a little more patience for those that just for anyone that's around you. So had kind of a heavy heart the past couple months, honestly. Um, India was a great respite from all. This was the the trip was post breakup, pre um, whatever that was. But yeah, my heart's been heavy, and it's funny. I've been working this corporate job for a couple of years now, maybe more like a year and a half, a year and 8 9 months. But I've been working this corporate job that I haven't loved, but it's been good, steady job, good pay. Um, it's all work from home, and the day after my my friend was put in the hospital, and I was up till 9 a.m. with him and some of his family. I slept for like 3 hours, and then I had a meeting for work, and I got laid off. And I remember thinking, this was just like a week ago. I remember thinking, wow, um, okay, don't really care. There's much more important things happening in my life right now, and I really just don't care. So, thanks for telling me. It felt like it felt like casual news, and I was like, I'm going back to bed. And granted, I'm in a state where I'm not worried. I have some severance, I have some savings, I have a good network of people that can help me get different employment. I would love to just focus on this podcast and writing and other creative endeavors, but I need I need some steady income. But my goal is to get there in the next few years. Maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 8 years, but I will get there. But yeah, just in the midst of all the things I was experiencing, letting me go from a job was very unpassionate about anyways. I was like, okay, to me it felt tantamount to somebody saying, hey, we're gonna up your rent $10 a month. I was like, yeah, okay, kind of sucks, but whatever. It's not gonna change my life that much. So yeah. Interesting week, interesting last couple months of my life, and I'm doing fine. I really am just emotionally exhausted in a lot of ways, and actively looking for reasons to be grateful and to learn. And I'm always looking for silver linings, for reasons to be happy, because sometimes happiness is tough. It doesn't necessarily come when you want it. It doesn't necessarily stick around as long as you think it should. And often you think, well, it's just around the corner, but then you get around the corner and it's not there. It's not there waiting for you. Or it's there waiting for you, but then it slips away just as soon as you touch it. So when you have it, you have to be grateful. You have to celebrate it, and you have to live in that moment. And you can't be distracted by your phone or by some frivolous activity. You have to feel it, and you have to be there, because it'll go away. It certainly will. And that's not pessimism. That's not bemoaning the state of life. That's just reality. And sometimes it sticks around for a while. And life feels good, and it feels effortless, and it feels rich and full. But there will certainly come a day when you'll get knocked on your tuchus because somebody will get sick, or something you love will go away. It's the natural state of things. So you have to have things that bring you joy, and you have to relish in moments of happiness. So yeah, this India trip, I had an old roommate like 10 years ago. And when I say 10, I mean 13, that moved in with me and some high school friends straight from India. I'm talking his first day in America was his first day as our roommate. And he was always a nice kid, always, like kind of funny. Not like, not going to put him on a top 10 list of funniest friends I've ever had, but it was kind of funny. And most people aren't funny. A lot of people have good senses of humor, but most people are not funny. But he was kind of funny and, interesting. I had never lived with somebody from Asia, let alone India. And he was just going to BYU, good accounting program, and we became close. And I think he only lived with us for maybe a year and a half or so, but we always, kept in touch. There's about 5 of us from high school that lived with him and kept in touch. And then he went to my buddy's wedding, I think 7 years ago, and that was the last time we saw him. But we actually kept in touch. Like, we would have the occasional phone call, text here and there, of course, but I feel like if you're actually making phone calls, you're keeping in touch. So, yeah, he was just a special kid. And at the time, I think he was, he was 18, fresh off the boat. And, we were a few years older. And so, anyways, he hit me and some of our other friends up a couple months ago and was like, hey, I'm getting married in India and I'd love for you guys to be there. It would mean a lot. And listen, I had always wanted to go to India. Like, I think I've always been fascinated by the fact that it's so highly populated. Like, I want to go to China too. But India seems more beautiful, more, I don't want to say rustic, but more romantic. I don't know, like, China seems so just like business. Everyone there seems so serious. And I'm sure one day I'll go to China and I will love it. But India has always sounded more interesting and more beautiful. And so me and one of my best friends who's married jumped at the opportunity. So him and his wife came. So it was just us 3. A few others wanted to come, wasn't super realistic with their lives. India's a commitment, and you don't want to go there for 4 or 5 days, So we went for, I think, 9 total days. I mean, with travel, we were really only there about a week. But yeah, we got, flights were expensive, but we stayed in a nice hotel that was paid for by our friend and his family. So we were pretty hooked up, and we're like, you know what? How often does somebody invite you to India? And how often do you actually have things to do when you get there? So he was awesome and gave us a lot of ideas of things we could do and places we could go that were within reason. I didn't realize India was so massive. I guess it's about 1/3 of the size of the United States, and that's counting Alaska. But the United States has about 400 million people, and India has 1.4 billion people. So, kind of crazy. And that was one of the things that was so interesting to me. We got a tour guide, and we went through this company that provides you with drivers and tour guides, and sometimes they kind of do both. But for most of our trip, we had these guys with us throughout a lot of the day, most of the day, and they were amazing, awesome local guys. And so I would always ask them questions about, well, how many people live in this state, or how many people are in this city, and obviously stuff I could look up myself. But on these trips, I try to stay off my phone as much as possible, besides taking pictures. So my phone's out a lot, but I try not to be Googling stuff and checking Instagram and stuff like that. I'll do that a little bit when we're like back at the hotel at night, but I feel like, if you're going to do that on vacation, do it if you're in like San Diego or Chicago or someplace with not a lot of novelty. But when you're in a new country that you've never been to, everything's new, the culture, the food, the smells, you really got to soak that in. And on those long days of seeing as much as you can, your phone battery can dry up pretty quick anyway, so it's good to stay off it. But I remember asking them, let's see, I wrote a few of these down. These are some crazy numbers. So in one of the states we were in, it has Uttar Pradesh. There's no way I'm saying that right. But Uttar Pradesh, they would call it UP. It was about 94,000 square miles. Now, mind you, Utah is about 85,000 miles. So a little bit bigger than Utah. I guess it's roughly the size of France. France has about 67 million people. Utah has got 3 or 4 million people. Uttar Pradesh has 243 million people. So that was pretty mind-blowing. That's one state, a little bit bigger than Utah, and has like, not great at math, but like United States 400 million. This is 243 million. It's crazy. It's its own freaking country, but it's one little state. And then we went to another state called Rajasthan. 78 million people. Okay, cool. And the other two states we went to, Haryana, 25 million, Delhi, 33 million. So, let's see, I've been to some densely populated places. I've been to Mexico, but I haven't been to Mexico City, so actually I'm not going to count that. I've been to Sao Paulo, which is very densely populated. So is Rio de Janeiro, where I lived, but Sao Paulo has crazy numbers. I can't remember what they are, but the metropolitan Sao Paulo is, I think, in top 10 of most populated places, most populated cities. Obviously New York, but I don't know. You've been to New York a couple times. It kind of doesn't feel that special anymore, especially because you see it on TV every day. But that's it. Haven't been to China, haven't been to Nigeria, haven't been to Bangladesh, haven't been to Pakistan. A lot of these really, highly populated places. So this was crazy because it sounds trite to say this, but there was just literally people everywhere. And the traffic was unbelievably insane. In a lot of places, it felt like it was like 80% motorcycles, 20% cars, a lot of bikes, but it just seemed like there were no rules or laws. Definitely no one's getting pulled over for not blinking, and there's so many people you literally can't speed. So in a weird way, it felt really safe. Like, our drivers were doing some crazy maneuvers, and even one time they clipped a car's mirror, and like, our driver didn't say anything. The car that got clipped saw it, didn't really react. A lot of cars and motorcycles had a lot of scratches and dents on them, but I didn't see a single accident. I don't know, there was so much traffic, you just can't go fast. And so people are doing crazy maneuvers, especially in the motorcycles. But I don't know, it just works. And everyone there is super aggressive because you have to be. So no, I feel like no one gets mad because they're just like, oh yeah, like that's what they had to do. And everyone's honking constantly, but it's not out of rage. It's almost like, hey, I'm coming up behind you. Hey, I'm darting in front of you. um, so yeah, it was just cool to see how things work differently. It made me feel like everybody that's like complaining about traffic in America, it's like, dude, get a grip. You have no idea. Um, you have no idea. And yeah, so what else? Let's see. I won't go through the whole rigmarole of, I said that weird, but of explaining all the places we went and all the touristy stuff we saw. There were some really, really beautiful things we saw, mostly like Hindu temples. They're amazing. And some of them we saw were really, really old. Obviously, in Agra, we saw the Taj Mahal, which was unbelievably majestic. You see it in pictures, but it just was special. And that's when it's funny, we saw that on our first day. We like landed on like no sleep. Our tour guide picked us up. We drove a few hours and saw the Taj Mahal before sunset. At sunset, actually. It's funny, our tour guide was like, just so you know, this will be the best thing you'll see the whole trip. I was like, oh, dang. And he's kind of right. But yeah, it was so beautiful. But at this like amazing, gigantic mausoleum is where we realized we were celebrities. And me, my friend, and his lovely wife. People started like lining up to take pictures with us. And you know, I've lived outside of the US and I've been to a lot of third world countries, and I know sometimes they get enamored with Americans, or not even enamored, just surprised and happy to see them. Especially in smaller villages and stuff where they're not used to seeing tourists. But I thought it was interesting at such a touristy spot there was not a lot of Westerners. There just wasn't. I feel like, and there were thousands of people, and maybe hundreds, but you know, people were coming in and out, so it's really hard to gauge. But there was so many people at the Taj Mahal, and I feel like maybe a handful of people that weren't Indian. So it was crazy. All the tourists were Indian, and yeah, people just started lining up, taking pictures, and guess what? I liked it. Now I know if this happened every day of my life, if I was a true celebrity, it would probably get old and tiresome and annoying. But listen, I wasn't mad at the attention. And I just thought it was kind of cute. I was like, you want a picture of me just because I'm tall and my skin is fair? Okay. Like, if that's cool to you, sweet, let's do it. Like, you know, I didn't want to like waste my whole day taking pictures, but I was happy to take a few here and there. Thought it was amusing. A lot of them couldn't really speak much English, but they would just look at us and say, selfie, selfie. And I said, sure. If you want a picture with me, not sure why, happy to do it. But so that was interesting. Let's see. The caste system. The caste system was wild. I've known about it, you know, for however long, but it is very alive and real. It's not just this ancient cultural thing. It is current and very much alive. And again, I asked our drivers, I asked our tour guides, I asked people at the wedding about it, and I got very different responses from people at the wedding. At the wedding, both families very wealthy. A lot of them have relatives that live in the United States. So, you know, they themselves are in a different caste, but a lot of them made it sound like it was kind of this antiquated thing, and it wasn't really, um, I guess they made it sound like the caste system didn't matter to them. They didn't consider it all that often. Whereas the poorer people I talked to, they made it sound like, yeah, that's how everything runs through the caste. Like, you marry within your caste, you get your job based on your caste. You like people can tell what caste you are just by looking at you. Um, and I thought that was so fascinating. And if you don't know, the caste system is kind of it's almost it's almost like apartheid. Not quite, because it's not mandated by the state. There's nothing in the state law that says like because you are caste A, B, or C, you have to do this or you have to do that. But it's deeply, deeply seated in the culture. And they even have affirmative action. So if you're in a lower caste, you can get certain jobs. You can, more of you will be accepted into certain schools. I even heard somebody say, he's like, the reason so many Indians, like really smart Indians, go and study in the US is because they have a harder time getting into colleges because of the affirmative action. And I didn't do any further research, but I thought that was interesting. But when I talked to our drivers and some of these lower caste people, they said like, yeah, that's how it is. You marry within your caste, and there's zero upward mobility. There's no way you can change your caste. And then I talked to some wealthier people, and they said, well, yeah, it's pretty like it's kind of based on your heritage and your family, your lineage, and so that can't change. And I said, well, what if you win the lottery? Are you all of a sudden top caste? And they're like, no, you're still a lower caste. So it's really interesting stuff. I'd have to really, I feel like if I lived there for a while, I'd really start to understand it. But there's definitely some nuance. There's definitely some racial tension because of it, some ethnic tensions, a lot of stuff I don't fully understand, but it was cool and interesting to kind of understand it better and understand how real it is. The other thing that's crazy is arranged marriages, you know? And listen, arranged marriages have been around forever. They're if you look in antiquity, they're very common, especially in royal families. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but most of that practice kind of died out sometime in the 20th century in most countries. It became less about utility and more about love, right? And the more you study arranged marriages in the past, the more you realize, well, no wonder everyone was unfaithful. But because it's not like love didn't exist back then. They just married for utility, and you married certain families, and a lot of it had to do with things not involved with love. But India has held strong, held really strong. So our buddy that got married was technically an arranged marriage. Now he said that they dated for a while, but his parents set him up. And I think his family and her family, they're a little more laissez-faire with the whole thing. And they seem less concerned with caste and all these things, probably because they're wealthy. But yeah, he was getting up in age. I think he was 30, and his parents were like, hey, what are you doing, pal? We're going to start looking. And I think, they would have been open to him marrying somebody else, but they were kind of like, hey, we've got our eye on this girl. What do you say? And so, but a lot of people don't court at all. And again, I asked my drivers, my tour guides, and I would always say, And they were such lovely people, very open, very happy to just talk about whatever. And I would say, hey, so are you in arranged marriage? And they would say, yep, arranged marriage. And I thought, wow. And I would ask, and I remember one of our tour guides said, yeah, my mom and sisters set us up, and she's great. And I was like, well, what happens if I'm all curious. I'm like, what happens if you you get set up and you just don't like her? She sucks. She's busted. Whatever. And he's like, well, I trust my mom and sister. They wouldn't set me up with somebody I wouldn't like or I wouldn't be compatible with. And I was like, okay, touche. I mean, I don't know that I trust my mom and sisters to set me up with a life partner. Um, but kudos to them. And I've told some people since I got home about kind of this interesting phenomenon, and everyone's always like, "Oh man, that would be so hard. I don't know how they make it work. I don't know how they just like fall in love anyway." But I think the main difference is that's the expectation. They've grown up knowing they're going